Next, I want to introduce someone to you whom I've only gotten to know for a couple of minutes behind stage, but I know that I'm already going to love her and we're kindred spirits. And the reason is, and let me tell you her name first, Samantha Madrid. She's the Vice President of Security and Business for Juniper Networks. The reason I know that we're kindred spirits is her talk today is entitled The Art of the Possible, Achieving Goals Despite Being Told No. Part of the reason I know that is, for those who can see, no excuses is my own personal hashtag. There's a reason the name of the book that I was in was called Unstoppable. So with that, I'm really excited to bring Samantha up to share her story of her journey, the challenges she faced, and not saying no. Samantha.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning. You know, I tell you, this is a first. I've done a women's luncheon and I had a Q&A session, but this is the first time I've ever been invited to speak about my journey in such a large setting. So bear with me. This is new, and I'll be honest. The reason it's new is because I never thought, and maybe this is typical of most women, we never thought that what it took to get us to where we are is worth knowing. I truly, right? I never understood that. And then I had a lot of women, since taking my position at Juniper, ask me, how did I get there? You know, what were some of the challenges? What were some of the things that I've learned? And the wheels started turning as, wow, people may actually want to hear this. So hopefully you'll enjoy the talk. But I wanted to start out by, talking about obstacles. And in particular, there was this quote, a Zen proverb that said, "The obstacle is the path." And I saw this a while ago on Pinterest. I love Pinterest. Spend a lot of time there. A lot of my inspiration comes from Pinterest. But it was interesting because when I stopped and I reflected on it, I realized that that's true. That it wasn't the times where I got the high fives. It wasn't the times where I got the pat on the back. Don't get me wrong, those are wonderful. But it was the times where I had to rise up and overcome someone telling me no. Someone telling me I wasn't ready. Someone telling me I wasn't good enough or I wasn't meant to be doing what I was doing. That was the path that laid forth that has me on stage with you today. It was the perseverance. We hear it often called grit. We hear it being talked about, that will to pursue the dream. And this is applicable for not just women, but for men too. In fact, cybersecurity, and we've heard this before, is predominantly men, right? In fact, when I started out 20 plus years ago, I was literally the only woman in a room this big. And at the time, I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. I never saw it as a negative. But at the same time, there were a lot of obstacles along the way. There were a lot of no's that I learned to navigate. And so what I wanted to do with you today and talk through, in our 20 minutes together, was to talk through how I navigated that. And what are kind of the 5 quick things that I used to kind of keep myself on that path. So I thought it would be a good idea to talk about how everything connects, your life, how you got started. And so I thought it would be appropriate just to kind of share a little bit about you, what kind of put me on this path. So rewind the clock. I was in high school. And I'll preface by saying I was raised by a single mother. I was actually labeled the poor kid in school. Got the free lunches in public school. Never had anything handed to me. And I remember I was in high school. I think it was roughly sophomore year. I don't quote me on that. But suffice it to say, I was in my high school counselor's office. And she asked me, "What do you want to be when you grow up, Samantha? Do you want to go to college?" I said, "Well, of course. Why wouldn't I want to go to college?" And she's like, "Well, what do you want to be?" And I said, "Well, I haven't quite decided, but there's 3 things I wanted to be. I either wanted to be an executive, I wanted to run a business. That was number 1. Number 2, I thought I could be a trial attorney, wanted to be a lawyer. Thought that would be really cool. And then the 3rd thing I said is I wanted to be a lobbyist. And I wanted to get into politics. I wanted to persuade a point of view, for someone that didn't have a voice. That was really important. It was those three things. She sat back in her chair, and I swear I'll never forget this. She goes, "You may want to choose a different path." And I was like, "What?" She's like, "Not everybody is meant for college." And I remember thinking, well, I'm not a bad student. I wasn't a 4.0, not going to say that. But I was a decent student. I was varsity on the debate team. I was co-captain of a swim team, swam in college. Well, that's a little bit later. I was very competitive. I was driven. But she's like, that wasn't your path. And I remember I left that night. First of all, I was shell-shocked. And then I left, and I was devastated. I went home, I cried all night long. And I'm like, well, here's this woman who's a counselor guiding people, guiding students, children on a path. And she told me the path that I thought for myself, when I'd look in the mirror since I was little, that it wasn't the right path for me. And then I got angry. And then this was the point in which I think defined who I am, truly. And I have to thank her. Because I got so angry at her, and I said, I'm going to show her. I'm going to show her that she is wrong. And so I worked super hard, got into college, and I proceeded down a path. And so when you kind of look through your path, and when you you have an opportunity at that point to let it define you, or let it motivate you. And I did it almost subconsciously. I didn't know. I didn't know at that time, being a young teenager, that that anger was used as a tailwind instead of a headwind for me. But it put me on a path that if I look back, I realize was all meant to happen in some way, shape, or form. And Steve Jobs has a great quote. He says, you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backwards. So when I look back, what happened was I went to school, I studied political science, decided to go the lobbyist route. Yeah, I'm not a lobbyist. But then after interning for a state senator, I started seeing things, and I'm like, this isn't for me. Something was telling me this isn't for me. And I always had this neat feeling of happiness and joy, and I had naturally gravitated towards computers. I remember as well, I would sit in the computer lab at the girls' club all by myself. And so when I was trying to figure out, well, what do I do next? I had met some people when I was interning for a state senator, and they worked for this small company at the time, this was in the mid-90s, called Cisco Systems. And I remember I got the opportunity to interview. They were looking for people, for SEs and whatnot. And I did not have a CS degree. I had no background other than my computers being a hobby. But I wanted that job. My gut told me I needed to get that job. And so what I did was I went and I studied. Went to the library, I started books, I read everything there was about networking, about TCP/IP, everything. And I made sure when I walked into that interview that I was going to get the job. I wasn't going to let the fact that I didn't have a background in computer science deter me. So fast forward, I got the job. And then I realized, holy moly, that self-doubt. I'm like, I think I may be in a little way over my head. So I paid out of my own pocket. I went and got certifications, Cisco certifications, and security certifications, and everything to quickly get myself up to speed. And the interesting thing is as I look back and I see how everything connects, starting back from the counselor in high school telling me no, all the way to the position I have now, I learned that it was all meant to be. That these obstacles that whether I didn't know what I was doing, whether I was told I couldn't know, were all a part of that path. So what are the things that I kind of focused on during that journey? And the first thing was I had to be introspective. So that's my number one thing for you, right? To really be honest with yourself in every given situation. You know, whether I'm managing people, mentoring people, I've often heard that looking introspectively and being honest about whether or not where you are in your journey, and being honest if you have put in the effort, or is there a way to go around that obstacle, right? And this is probably one of the hardest things for anybody, to literally look at themselves and say, should I have been promoted? Right? It's very easy to blame people when things don't go your way. So this is the big thing. Be introspective and ask yourself, you know, what do you really want? Do you really want to move up the ladder? Do you really want to get married? Do you really want kids? What do you want? And once you figure that out, then you do whatever you can to make that happen. And this is actually a question I ask everybody I interview. The question is, what are your blind spots? Because it's very telling to me how people answer that. Are they self-aware? My blind spot is not a fan of writing. I don't like it. So I partner with people to give me the confidence when I write. I actually bought a domain name, and I still haven't started writing. So it's one of my blind spots. It's one of my insecurities. But I look to overcome that this year. The second thing is probably my favorite, and that's everything's a choice. Now, this is probably the biggest, most profound thing that you could ever really embody. That everything in your life is a result of a choice you have made. Think about that for a minute. You may not have chosen a situation, but how you react to it is absolutely within your control. And that choice is what allows you to make and overcome that hurdle, that obstacle, that no. And it's oftentimes that when we hear no, we immediately go inward. We immediately decide that whether that person is a boss, a family member, what have you, that hearing the word no means we have no path. How many of you, if I were to ask for a show of hands, honestly, stopped what you were doing because you were told no? Raise your hand. Honestly. Okay, that's not, I'd say about 25% of you raised your hand. I appreciate the honesty, because you have a choice in every situation of whether or not to move forward. And this is also true when you're in a very frustrating situation. And believe me, I'm still working on this. I was in meetings last week, and I was not my best self. That when someone is not aligned with you, stepping back and thinking about whether or not has anything to do with the situation, it takes a lot of courage and takes a lot of self-strength. So remind yourself that everything is a choice. The third thing is that it's not always about you. This is the anti-motivational speech. But this is a hard truth. This is a hard truth for a lot of people to really internalize. That not every situation that you're in life, whether it's your personal life or a meeting, and the person that you're sitting across the table from, maybe you're having a heated exchange. Maybe you just had a performance review. Maybe someone was really disrespectful. I hear that a lot. In fact, I was doing a breakfast, and I get often the question is, well, I have a coworker, and they just don't like me. They're just really rude. Okay, maybe it's not about you. Take the time, and this is where things start to cascade, right? Be introspective, like we talked about, right? You have a choice about how to react. And then also understand the dynamic of what's happening. Understand that in the situation, that there's more at play. Ways I have found to navigate this is, trying to understand the other person's perspective, especially like in a negotiation. What is the goal that they're trying to accomplish? Can we have a common goal? And I'll tell you, this is also an area that I got hit with the brick, so to speak, early on in my career. So, as I told you, I used the obstacles and the no's as a way to use it as a tailwind, right? To fire me up, that fire in my belly when someone would tell me no. But I learned that it wasn't always about me in a very, very, it was a way that was very lesson learning. So this was early on in my career. I was in my early 20s, and I was on a very successful team. And I'll be honest, I thought my you-know-what didn't stink. I was all about Samantha. And I wanted to make sure that I was the best on the team. And I had some trophies in my cube area. It was about me, about me, about me. And I learned very early that being really good was only part of the equation. That, in fact, I was not benefiting the team because I didn't stop to think that it had nothing to do with me. And I learned very early from my boss, pulled me aside and said, look, you're great at what you do, but we don't want you on the team. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? I'm good. And that was a lesson that I'll tell you, it caught me blindside. And he's like, yep, you're going to need to find another team. And I was let go. I was fired. And I realized that couple things. One, that was 100% my own doing. Two, I never made that mistake again. So when I joined the next team, I learned that I needed to take a beat and think about just how my role, what I say, what I do, impacts everybody around me. And I had to understand and embody that the team's goal, the goal of wanting to be either the winning region, this was back when I was an SC, or wanting to achieve a business outcome, that I was paramount, and that if I was really good going after that with the team, and the team won, then I, by extension, won at that point, right? So that was a big lesson that I had to learn. The fourth thing was be adaptable. And, this is actually hard for a lot of people. But adaptability is one of the skills that I personally look for in anybody that I look to bring onto the team. Because you will never be able to predict what happens today and tomorrow at all. You will never be able to predict or properly plan for the skills that you need. But if you have the ability to adapt to the situation, the market, the people around you, you are invaluable. And this is almost, as I said, overcoming the no's. You have to be able to pivot around that. You're gonna have people that tell you no. And it doesn't mean that your goal is wrong or that you're not gonna reach your end destination. But what it does mean is that you may have to bob and weave. You may have to take an alternative path. So being adaptable is probably gonna be one of the most crucial skills that you're gonna have. Be flexible in your methods is often a quote. Be, not necessarily on your goal. Have your goal, but be very, very flexible on your method. And then the last one, and this one I would say is probably next to everything's a choice is my favorite. And this one is trust your gut. Everything I've done throughout my career, and I encourage my team, this is the one skill that I make sure in meetings and in one-on-ones. And when they ask a question, I said, what does your gut say? Go with your instincts. Because that's the number one thing that derails people from achieving their goal. And that's the number one thing that when they hear no, they step back, they lean back. It's because they didn't listen to their gut. I knew when I was just almost instinctually, like I said, when I was in high school, when she told me, the high school counselor told me that I wasn't meant to go on to college, I knew she was wrong. I knew it. There was no doubt in my mind. And then since then, I have guided, in everything that I've done has been instinctual. I listen to it. Am I wrong? Absolutely, I'm wrong sometimes. But the more you use your gut, the more you rely on your instincts, and that's your sense of self. Gut is just another way of saying you trust yourself. The more you do it, the stronger it becomes, the more confidence you build. And I'll give you a great example. So I joined Juniper about a little over a year and a half ago. And many years ago, Juniper was one of the premier cybersecurity companies in the industry. And then over the years, their strategy took them in a different direction. They reached out to me a little over a year and a half ago and asked if I would be interested in coming to lead the security business for them. And when I accepted and took the job, a lot of people that have known me over the past 20 plus years, what are you doing? Why did you join Juniper? They're not one of the leaders in cybersecurity. And I said, well, two reasons. One, I love being an underdog. I love it when people count me out, always have. Two, my gut told me to. My gut said this was the time, this was the right time. And so when I met with the leadership team and asked them some tough questions, as, for example, their commitment to the business. Were they willing to invest in not just me, but my team, but the business? Were they willing to fund new projects? They said yes. And my gut said, this is the opportunity. You need to do it. And so I joined, we laid out a strategy together that we call Connected Security. And the first time we unveiled that strategy was at RSA in 2019, was a year ago. And everybody was like, the analysts, no, you guys aren't leaders anymore. It's not going to happen. Listening to the strategy. And I was like, no, hear me out. And so we pushed on it, and we kept pushing. And so then, all of a sudden, things started to click. I wouldn't take no for an answer. I had to be flexible with the methods to get there. People didn't want to hear it. So we decided, you know what we're going to do? No one's going to believe if Juniper stands up on stage and says we're back in cybersecurity. No one's going to believe it because they've already decided, they made up their mind that we were no longer. So I went to our executives and I said, you know what? We need to have third-party validation. We need to invest in someone else other than Juniper saying that we have industry-leading technology. And they did. They invested in it. And so what we did was we put our products in third-party testing. Some of you may be familiar with NSS Labs. And we had them validate the technology. And then after our first test, going up against all the quote-unquote leaders in the space, we came out ahead. We came out of having 100% detection rates and evasions, over 99% in block rates of exploits, and with NSS Labs saying Juniper is back. Now, this wouldn't have happened if I listened to every analyst that I spoke to a year ago. This wouldn't have happened if I decided to listen to everybody telling me no, that this wasn't possible. But it is possible. And so what I did was everything we just talked about today, right? I was introspective. I looked at what did I need to do to lead the team? What did the team need? How do we respond to those telling us we weren't going to make it? What are some things we could do as a team to further the investments made? And all of that kind of culminated to what we're talking about today, achieving goals. But really, it all comes back to one thing in particular that keeps you from either achieving your goals or enables you to achieve your goals. And that's you. That's the secret. That's the art of it, is your self-confidence. It's no more than that. And this is a great quote. Oprah often uses it. But it's Glenda, the good witch. I've been called a witch many times, by the way, so that's why I thought this was really appropriate. Was that, you've always had the power, my dear. You just had to learn it for yourself. And that's true. And that's been the last 20 plus years in cybersecurity that has now gotten me to be the head of a business unit, all the way back from when I was a little girl. You have to believe in yourself. So it doesn't matter the obstacle, and believe me, there's people who have had it far worse than I, and there's people that have had obstacles in many, many different ways, and with you. But the end of the day, you are your only, you have to think about it as you are your only cheerleader, and you are going to be your only person who will either make it or break it for you. You have to, above all else, believe in yourself. Doesn't matter what your parents think. Like I told you, this is the anti-motivational speech. But I'm being 100% serious. Because people will come to you with their own level of perception. It may be a spouse, a partner, a family member, a friend, a coworker, a boss. If you truly believe you can do it, you can do it. And that's the lesson. So I'm out of time, but I hope this was helpful for you in kind of thinking through your path. Because again, there's no straight line. There's no right way. There's no wrong way other than not believing in yourself. So with that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the time and listening to me. But I have one more thing. We like giving away free things here at Juniper. And we would welcome you to please stop by our booth, say hello. If you take a selfie with our sign here, you will be entered to win a SRX 300 firewall and a Tory Burch bag. Its steps are pretty simple. Driven by different, we have a sign out there. Take a selfie, upload it to LinkedIn, tag any Juniper representative, and you'll be entered a drawing to win both of these items. So with that, I thank you very much. Hopefully you found some information helpful for you, and I'll be around for a few hours as well and happy to take any questions. Thank you.